Kehoe stood at the window of his ship, watching the stars pass by in streaks of light. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge was moving fast through space, but not fast enough for his liking. Every hour that passed meant more worlds were falling into chaos. The emergency message had reached him 3 days ago. Kehoe had been reviewing trade agreements in his quarters when the communication system started flashing red. Emergency priority. Galactic level threat. All human ambassadors to report immediately. When Talneth's face appeared on the screen, Kehoe knew something was very wrong. The alien's usually calm voice was shaking. Talneth was the speaker for the Galactic Trade Consortium, a position that required perfect control at all times. Kehoe had never seen him look so afraid. "Ambassador Kehoe," Talneth had said, his 3 eyes blinking rapidly. "We need human help. The Vorthak Empire has cut off all trade with 70% of known space. They say we are too dirty to do business with them. Too primitive. They call us inferior organic species." Kehoe had felt his stomach drop. The Vorthak were powerful. Their empire controlled some of the richest star systems in the galaxy. They had technology that other species could only dream of. If they stopped trading, entire worlds would starve. How bad is it? Kehoe had asked. "Bad," Talneth replied. "Supply ships cannot get through. Medicine, food, fuel, everything is blocked. Some planets only have weeks of supplies left. Wars are already starting over the trade routes that still work." Now 3 days later, Kehoe was racing toward the neutral station where emergency talks would be held. His aide Boram was sitting at a nearby desk reading through files about the Vorthak. She looked worried. "Sir," Boram said, looking up from her tablet, "I have been reading about previous negotiations with the Vorthak. They do not go well. The last 5 attempts all failed completely. The Vorthak representatives just walked away." Kehoe nodded. He had been studying the same files. The Vorthak were unlike any other species in the galaxy. They were made of living crystal that could change colors based on their emotions. They communicated through musical sounds that most species found beautiful but hard to understand. More importantly, they saw themselves as superior to all other life forms. They called other species organics like it was a dirty word. They believed that anything made of flesh and blood was naturally inferior to beings made of crystal. "What do you think went wrong in the other negotiations?" Kehoe asked Boram. "The reports say the Vorthak were insulted by the offers made to them," Boram replied. "They seem to think the other ambassadors were trying to trick them or waste their time. One Vorthak representative said that talking to organics was like trying to have a conversation with animals." Kehoe walked over to his desk and pulled up a different set of files. These were not diplomatic reports. They were studies about animal behavior that he had been reading for years. Most diplomats thought these files were strange hobby materials. Kehoe thought they were the most important documents he owned. He had spent 15 years studying how different species acted around each other in the wild. Predators and prey, hunters and the hunted, pack animals and loners. The same patterns showed up again and again, not just on Earth but on worlds across the galaxy. "Boram," Kehoe said slowly, "what if the other ambassadors approached this wrong? What if they tried to negotiate with the Vorthak like equals? Is that not how negotiations work?" Boram asked, looking confused. "Usually yes," Kehoe replied. "But what if the Vorthak do not see us as equals? What if they see us as something else entirely?" Kehoe pulled up a file about the Vorthak homeworld. The planet was covered in crystal forests and mineral mountains. The native life forms were small creatures that fed on light and minerals. They were peaceful. They were prey animals. "The Vorthak evolved from prey species," Kehoe said, pointing at the screen. "Look at their behavior patterns. They travel in groups. They position themselves near exits. They communicate through sounds that warn of danger. Even now, as an advanced spacefaring civilization, they still think like prey. What does that mean for us?" Boram asked. Kehoe turned to look at another file. This one was about humans, about how they had evolved as hunters on Earth. How they had climbed to the top of the food chain by being better predators than anything else on their planet. "It means," Kehoe said quietly, "that when the Vorthak look at humans, they do not see fellow civilized beings. They see predators. They see the thing that their species has been running from for millions of years." Boram's eyes widened. "So when our diplomats try to negotiate peacefully, the Vorthak think we are being weak?" "Worse," Kehoe said. "They think we are trying to trick them. In nature, when a predator acts friendly toward prey, it usually means the predator is hunting. The Vorthak probably think every peaceful gesture is actually a threat." The ship's communication system beeped. They were approaching the neutral station where the talks would be held. Through the window, Kehoe could see a massive structure floating in space. The station was designed to host diplomatic meetings between different species. It had sections built for beings who breathed different atmospheres and lived in different environments. "Sir," Boram said nervously, "if you are right about this, how do we negotiate with them? We cannot act like predators in a diplomatic meeting." Kehoe smiled for the first time in 3 days. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile a hunter might have when spotting prey. "Who says we cannot?" he replied. "Maybe it is time the galaxy learned that humans can be very good at being exactly what they are." The station grew larger in the window. Soon Kehoe would meet the Vorthak face to face. He would find out if his theory was correct. If it was, then everything about galactic diplomacy was about to change. If he was wrong, then billions of beings across the galaxy would suffer. Wars would spread. Worlds would starve. The greatest civilization in galactic history might collapse, but Kehoe did not think he was wrong. He had studied predators and prey his entire career. He knew how they thought. He knew how they acted, and he was about to show the Vorthak exactly what kind of predator humanity could be when it needed to. The neutral station Concordia was bigger than Kehoe had expected. As his shuttle docked, he could see ships from dozens of different species floating nearby. Everyone in the galaxy was watching these negotiations. Success meant peace and prosperity. Failure meant war and starvation. Kehoe walked through the station's corridors with Boram beside him. The artificial gravity felt strange after days in space. Other diplomats nodded politely as they passed, but Kehoe could see worry in their eyes. Everyone knew how important these talks were. "Ambassador Kehoe," a voice called out. Kehoe turned to see Thekmor approaching. Thekmor was the lead negotiator for the Spiral Alliance, a group of peaceful trading worlds. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. "I am glad you are here. We need all the help we can get." "How are the talks going so far?" Kehoe asked. Thekmor's expression grew darker. "Not well. The Vorthak delegation arrived yesterday. They have made their demands very clear. Complete human withdrawal from 12 star systems, tribute payments of rare minerals, and something they call genetic cleansing protocols for human colonies." Boram gasped. "Genetic cleansing? That sounds like they want to decide which humans are allowed to live," Kehoe finished. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "What have you offered them in return?" "Everything we can think of," Thekmor replied. "Trade concessions, technology sharing, cultural exchange programs. Velandra from the Peaceful Rings Coalition even offered to give them 3 entire star systems with no strings attached." "And their response?" "They laughed," Thekmor said bitterly. "Actually laughed. Then they increased their demands." Kehoe nodded slowly. This was exactly what he had expected. "When do I meet them?" "The opening ceremony is in 1 hour," Thekmor said. "All the delegations will be there. But Kehoe, I should warn you. The Vorthak leader, Prime Resonator Kelvith, is unlike anything you have dealt with before. He radiates confidence, power. He acts like he owns the entire galaxy." "Thank you for the warning," Kehoe said. "I will keep that in mind." An hour later, Kehoe entered the main conference hall. The room was huge, with seating areas designed for different species. Some areas had water for aquatic beings. Others had different atmospheric mixes. In the center was a raised platform where the Vorthak delegation sat. Kehoe's first look at the Vorthak took his breath away. They were beautiful in a terrifying way. Their bodies were made of living crystal that shifted through different colors as they moved. Prime Resonator Kelvith was the largest, his crystal form towering over the others. Colors flowed through his body like liquid light, but Kehoe was not looking at their beauty. He was watching their behavior, and everything he saw confirmed his theory. The Vorthak had positioned themselves on the highest platform in the room. This gave them a view of all the exits. When other delegates entered the room, the Vorthak crystals would flicker briefly, a startled response. When groups of delegates gathered together, the Vorthak would shift closer to each other. Most telling of all was how they reacted to direct eye contact. When other ambassadors tried to look directly at Kelvith, his crystals would flare brighter. It looked impressive, but Kehoe recognized it for what it was, a threat display meant to make predators back down. Dr. Yunseo, the human xenobiologist on Kehoe's team, was sitting nearby with a discreet scanner. She caught Kehoe's eye and nodded slightly. Her readings were confirming what Kehoe already suspected. The ceremony began with speeches from various ambassadors. Each one talked about peace, cooperation, and mutual benefit. Each one spoke respectfully about Vorthak culture and achievements. Each one carefully avoided anything that might be seen as threatening or aggressive. And with each respectful, peaceful speech, Kehoe watched the Vorthak crystals grow brighter and more confident. When it was Thekmor's turn to speak, he offered even more concessions than before. The Spiral Alliance is prepared to share our most advanced medical technology, he said, his voice humble. We only ask for fair treatment in return. Kelvith's response was a musical sound that the translators rendered as laughter. Organic creatures offering us their primitive medicine? How amusing. We will consider adding your worlds to our list of acceptable servants. When Velandra spoke, she went even further. The Peaceful Rings Coalition offers complete submission to Vorthak authority in exchange for basic trade rights. We recognize your natural superiority over organic life. This time, Kelvith's crystals pulsed with colors that Kehoe's research told him indicated satisfaction and dominance. At least one species understands its proper place, the Vorthak leader said. We may allow some of your worlds to survive. Kehoe watched all of this with growing understanding. The other ambassadors thought they were being diplomatic. They thought showing respect and offering concessions would make the Vorthak more reasonable. Instead, they were triggering every predator-prey instinct the Vorthak had evolved over millions of years. To the Vorthak, submissive behavior meant weakness. Offerings meant that the other species were already defeated. Humble requests for mercy meant that it was time to move in for the kill. The Vorthak were not negotiating. They were hunting. And every other species in the room was acting like prey. When Kehoe's turn came to speak, he stood up slowly, but instead of walking to the speaking podium like the others had done, he remained standing at his seat. This put him at the same height as the Vorthak platform. Prime Resonator Kelvith, Kehoe said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. I bring greetings from humanity. Kelvith's crystals flickered with what looked like annoyance. Another organic species come to beg for mercy? How tiresome. Not quite, Kehoe replied. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone that made the other delegates look up in surprise. I came to see if the stories about Vorthak's strength were true. The room went completely silent. Kelvith's crystal shifted through colors that indicated shock and anger. You dare question our strength? Kehoe smiled. It was not a diplomatic smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator sizing up potential prey. I do not question it, Kehoe said quietly. I recognize it. The question is whether you recognize ours. For the first time since the negotiations began, Prime Resonator Kelvith's crystals dimmed slightly. For just a moment, the confident predator looked uncertain, and Kehoe knew that his theory was correct. The Vorthak understood strength. They respected power. They responded to predators. It was time to show them exactly what kind of predator humanity could be. The tension in the conference hall was thick enough to cut with a knife. After Kehoe's challenge, Prime Resonator Kelvith had called for a recess. The other delegates whispered among themselves, shooting worried glances at the human delegation. Thekmor hurried over to Kehoe as soon as the Vorthak left the room. What are you doing? He asked urgently. You just insulted the most powerful being in the galaxy. He could declare war on all organic species. He was already planning to do that, Kehoe replied calmly. The only question was whether it would be a quick conquest or a long hunt. Velandra joined them, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. Ambassador Kehoe, please reconsider your approach. Aggression will only make things worse. Will it? Kehoe asked. How has submissive behavior worked out so far? Before anyone could answer, a Vorthak messenger approached. The crystal being's body was smaller than Kelvith's, and its colors were muted. Prime Resonator Kelvith requests a private meeting with the human ambassador, it said in musical tones. I accept, Kehoe said immediately. Boram looked worried. Sir, should I come with you? No, Kehoe replied. This is something I need to do alone. An hour later, Kehoe entered a smaller conference room deep in the station. The room was designed for privacy, with no windows and sound-dampening fields. Prime Resonator Kelvith was waiting inside, his massive crystal form dominating the space. Instead of sitting at the conference table as expected, Kehoe remained standing. He walked slowly around the room, his movements deliberate and controlled. It was the behavior of a predator checking its territory. "You interest me, human," Kelvith said, his colors shifting through patterns that indicated curiosity mixed with wariness. "Most organics cower in my presence." "You do not, should I?" Kehoe asked, continuing his slow circuit of the room. "You are impressive, certainly, but so am I in my own way." "Explain." Kehoe stopped walking and turned to face the Vorthak directly. "You have been very successful with your hunting strategy. Isolate your prey. Make them desperate. Force them to offer everything they have just for the chance to survive. It is elegant, effective." Kelvith's crystals brightened with what looked like pride. "You understand strategy better than the others." "I should," Kehoe said. "My species wrote the book on hunting." Kehoe pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic display filled the room, showing images that no alien species had ever seen before. Human soldiers in combat, massive battleships moving through space, weapons that could crack planets. "We have never shared this information with the galactic community," Kehoe said conversationally. "Most species find it disturbing. They prefer to think of humans as peaceful explorers." The images continued. Human marines fighting in environments that would kill most beings. Human pilots flying ships through asteroid fields that computers said were impossible to navigate. Human colonists surviving on worlds where nothing should be able to live. "Interesting," Kelvith said, but his colors were shifting toward patterns that indicated unease. "You show me your military strength to threaten me?" "Not to threaten," Kehoe said. "To establish credentials." Kehoe changed the display. Now it showed detailed intelligence about the Vorthak Empire, military positions, resource shortages, internal political tensions, information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. "How did you—" Kelvith began. "We are very good at hunting information," Kehoe interrupted, "just like we are good at hunting everything else. Did you know that your empire is overextended? Your resources are running low. Your territorial expansion has left you vulnerable." Kelvith's crystals flared with anger. "You dare," I observed, Kehoe said calmly. "Just like you observed that the other species were weak and desperate. You saw opportunity. You moved to take advantage. I respect that. It is what any good predator would do." Kehoe walked closer to the Vorthak leader. Not close enough to be threatening, but close enough to demonstrate that he was not afraid. "The difference is that you have been hunting prey species," Kehoe continued. "Peaceful traders, diplomatic cooperators, beings who evolved to avoid conflict. You got used to easy targets. And humans are not easy targets." Kehoe smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Humans are apex predators, prime resonator. We climbed to the top of our planet's food chain by being better hunters than everything else. We turned other predators into pets. We made prey animals into livestock. We reshaped our entire world to suit our needs." The holographic display changed again. This time it showed Earth's history. Humans hunting massive animals with primitive weapons. Humans building cities where once there had been wilderness. Humans domesticating wolves and turning them into dogs. "Your species evolved from crystal formations that fed on light and minerals," Kehoe said. "Beautiful, peaceful, intelligent, but still prey. Deep in your genetic memory, you remember what it feels like to be hunted." Kelvith's colors were shifting rapidly now. Fear mixed with anger mixed with something that might have been respect. "You think to intimidate me with your predator nature?" Kelvith asked, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "No," Kehoe said. "I think to educate you. There is a difference between hunting prey and hunting predators. Prey species will submit when cornered. They will offer everything they have to avoid destruction. But predators? When cornered, predators fight back." Kehoe placed a datapad on the table between them. "That contains everything we know about your military capabilities. Your weaknesses, your supply lines, the frequencies that can disrupt your crystalline structure, the political divisions within your empire." Kelvith stared at the device but did not touch it. "Why are you showing me this?" the Vorthak leader asked. "Because I want you to understand something very important," Kehoe said. "You started this conflict thinking you were the hunter and everyone else was prey. That worked fine with the other species. But humanity is not prey." Kehoe leaned forward slightly, just enough to trigger instincts that were millions of years old, just enough to remind Kelvith of what it felt like when something dangerous was paying attention to you. "So now you have a choice," Kehoe said quietly. "You can continue trying to hunt us and discover what happens when prey species evolve into apex predators, Or you can recognize that you are dealing with another hunter and negotiate accordingly. You threaten war. I offer truth, Kehoe replied. Your current strategy will not work on humans. Push us too far, and you will discover that we are very good at pushing back. Continue your embargo, and you will learn that humans can be remarkably creative when it comes to solving problems that involve removing obstacles. Kelvith was silent for a long moment. His crystals shifted through colors that indicated deep thought, mixed with uncertainty. What do you propose? He asked finally. A conversation between equals, Kehoe said. Not prey begging for mercy, not predators establishing dominance. Two apex species discussing mutual interests. And if I refuse? Kehoe's smile returned. Then you will discover that humans can be just as effective at economic warfare as the Vorthak. Except we learned our techniques by actually hunting things that could fight back. For the first time since the negotiations began, Prime Resonator Kelvith looked genuinely uncertain. The confident predator had realized that he might not be at the top of the food chain after all. Very well, Kelvith said slowly. Let us negotiate as equals. But understand this, human, I am not easily intimidated. Neither am I, Kehoe replied. That is why this might actually work. Word of Kehoe's private meeting with Prime Resonator Kelvith spread through the station like wildfire. Ambassador Wei Jin from the Peaceful Coalition was furious. He cornered Kehoe in the corridor outside the human delegation quarters. What do you think you are doing? Wei Jin demanded, his face red with anger. You are endangering the entire negotiation process. The Vorthak could declare war on all organic species because of your reckless behavior. They were already planning to do that, Kehoe replied calmly. The only difference is that now they know it would not be as easy as they thought. You cannot know that, Wei Jin said. You are gambling with billions of lives. Every negotiation is a gamble, Kehoe said. The question is whether you bet on strength or weakness. Captain Hee Sung of the station security forces was having her own problems. Delegates from a dozen species were demanding meetings with her, all complaining about the human ambassador's aggressive tactics. Some were threatening to leave the station entirely. Captain, her security chief reported, we have 3 separate delegations requesting military escorts. They say they no longer feel safe with humans on the station. Ridiculous, Hee Sung muttered. The humans have been perfectly peaceful. More peaceful than most species, actually. But she understood their fear. Kehoe's approach had shattered the comfortable illusion that diplomacy was always about polite conversation and mutual respect. He had reminded everyone that beneath the civilized surface, interspecies relations were still about power and dominance. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening in the Vorthak delegation area. Secondary Resonator Pelkith approached Kehoe during the evening meal period. The smaller Vorthak's crystals were dim, indicating either fear or secrecy. Human ambassador, Pelkith said quietly. I must speak with you privately. Kehoe followed the Vorthak to a small observation lounge overlooking the station's central docking bay. They were alone except for the stars visible through the transparent walls. You have created quite a stir among my people, Pelkith said. Some are angry, some are afraid, but some are curious. Curious about what? About how you knew so much about our internal affairs, Pelkith replied. Your information was very accurate. Too accurate. We thought our security was perfect. Kehoe waited. He had learned that sometimes the best way to get information was to let the other person fill the silence. There are things you should know about the Vorthak Empire, Pelkith continued. Things that Prime Resonator Kelvith does not want other species to learn. Such as? We are not as united as we appear, Pelkith said, his crystals shifting to patterns that indicated nervousness. There are factions within our empire. Not all of us agree with the current aggressive expansion policy. This was exactly what Kehoe had hoped to hear, but he kept his expression neutral. Tell me more. The empire has been growing for centuries, Pelkith explained. We have conquered system after system, absorbed species after species. But growth requires resources, and our resources are becoming stretched thin. Kehoe nodded. His intelligence reports had suggested this, but confirmation from a Vorthak source was valuable. The trade embargo was not just about superiority, Pelkith continued. It was about hiding our weakness. If other species knew how desperately we need certain resources, they might realize that we are not as powerful as we pretend to be. What resources? Kehoe asked. rare minerals that our crystalline biology requires, energy sources that power our technology. Most importantly, new territories where our population can expand. Our core worlds are becoming overcrowded. Kehoe processed this information carefully. The Vorthak were facing an internal crisis. The aggressive expansion was not just cultural behavior, it was survival necessity. "Why are you telling me this?" Kehoe asked. Pelkith's crystals dimmed further. "Because some of us believe that cooperation might serve our empire better than conquest. But such ideas are considered treasonous. Speaking them openly would mean exile or worse. And you think humans might be willing to cooperate? Your species is the first to approach us as equals rather than subjects," Pelkith said. "That suggests possibilities that conquest cannot provide." Kehoe returned to his quarters with his mind racing. Boram was waiting with more intelligence reports, but these came from human sources. "Sir," Boram said, "Duyan has finished analyzing the Vorthak power structure. You need to see this." Duyan was Kehoe's intelligence analyst, a quiet woman who could find patterns in data that others missed. Her report was detailed and disturbing. "The Vorthak Empire is more fragile than anyone realizes," Duyan explained via secure communication. "Their expansion has created internal tensions. Resource shortages are causing political instability. Several outer systems are barely under imperial control." "How long before internal problems become a crisis?" Kehoe asked. "Maybe 10 years, Duyan replied. "Possibly less if something triggers a major resource shortage." Kehoe stared at the data for a long time. The Vorthak were not the invincible empire they pretended to be. They were a civilization under stress, lashing out at others to hide their own vulnerabilities. But that made them more dangerous, not less. Desperate predators were the most unpredictable. "There is something else," Duyan continued. "I have been analyzing communication patterns within the Vorthak fleet. There are encrypted transmissions that suggest some kind of internal political maneuvering. Someone is planning something." Kehoe's secure communicator chimed. Lieutenant Commander Jamin, his military liaison, had urgent news. "Ambassador," Jamin said, "we have detected Vorthak military movements in 3 sectors. Ships are being repositioned towards strategic choke points. It looks like they are preparing for something big." "War preparations?" "Maybe," Jamin replied. "Or maybe preparing to enforce their embargo with military force. Either way, the situation is escalating." Kehoe faced a decision that could determine the fate of billions of beings. He could request human fleet backup, bring military pressure to bear on the Vorthak. That might force them to negotiate, but it could also trigger the very war he was trying to prevent. Or he could continue with his current strategy, trusting that his understanding of predator psychology would be enough to find a solution. "Sir," Boram said quietly, "what do we do?" Kehoe looked out at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, Vorthak fleets were moving into position. Somewhere else, human colonies were running out of supplies. The galaxy was balanced on the edge of a knife. "We do what predators do when facing another predator," Kehoe said finally. "We adapt." He activated his communicator and sent a message to Prime Resonator Kelvith. The message was simple. "I challenge you to a formal dominance trial according to ancient Vorthak custom. Winner takes all." Boram stared at him in shock. "Sir, no non-Vorthak has ever attempted such a trial. The cultural requirements alone could kill you." "Maybe," Kehoe agreed, "but playing it safe has not worked so far." The response from Kelvith came within minutes. "Challenge accepted. Prepare yourself, human. You are about to learn what dominance truly means." Kehoe smiled grimly. The Vorthak leader still thought he was dealing with prey. He was about to discover his mistake. But first, Kehoe had to survive a trial that was designed to break the mind and spirit of anyone who attempted it. A trial that would test not just his intelligence and will, but his understanding of what it truly meant to be an apex predator. The real hunt was about to begin. The station's central amphitheater had been transformed for the dominance trial. Representatives from dozens of species filled the viewing areas, watching what many believed would be the destruction of human diplomatic credibility. The trial had never been attempted by a non-Vorthak before, and most observers expected Kehoe to fail catastrophically. Prime Resonator Kelvith stood at the center of the amphitheater, his massive crystalline form pulsing with confident colors. Around him, complex harmonic equipment had been set up to conduct the trial according to ancient Vorthak traditions. Kehoe entered the arena with Sujin at his side. Sujin was his cultural specialist. a woman who had spent years studying alien music and communication patterns. She would operate the translation matrix that would allow Kehoe to participate in the harmonic elements of the trial. Remember, Sujin whispered as they approached the center, the trial is not just about proving your intelligence or strength. It is about demonstrating your understanding of Vorthak cultural concepts at the deepest level. Dominance, territory, survival. You need to show that you understand these things the way they understand them. Kehoe nodded. He had spent the last 2 days studying everything humanity knew about Vorthak culture. But more importantly, he had been planning how to use their own cultural concepts against them. The trial began with Kelvith creating a complex pattern of harmonic sounds. The translation matrix rendered it as a formal challenge, calling Kehoe a primitive organic who dared to challenge the superiority of crystalline life. Instead of responding with traditional harmonic patterns, Kehoe did something unexpected. He introduced rhythm. Human music was based on rhythm in ways that most alien species found primitive, but Kehoe was not trying to create beautiful music. He was creating something more basic, more primal, the steady beat of a human heart, the rhythm of footsteps tracking prey. Sujin worked frantically at the translation matrix, converting Kehoe's rhythmic patterns into concepts that the Vorthak could understand. But she was also adding elements that no Vorthak had ever heard before: silence, percussion, the sounds of a predator hunting. Kehoe began to tell a story. Not the polite diplomatic story that other ambassadors might tell, but the true story of humanity's rise to dominance. He spoke of the early humans who hunted massive beasts across frozen plains. He described how they worked together in coordinated packs, using intelligence and tools to bring down prey many times their size. He told of their expansion across their homeworld, adapting to every environment, conquering every ecosystem, but he told it in Vorthak cultural terms. Territory gained and held, resources acquired and controlled, competitors eliminated or dominated. Kelvith responded with the Vorthak Empire's own history. He sang of their conquest of crystalline worlds, their absorption of lesser crystal species, their expansion across mineral-rich star systems. His harmonic patterns were complex and beautiful, showcasing the technological superiority that had made the Vorthak dominant. The two stories became a duel, each leader trying to prove that their species was the superior predator, each using their cultural strengths to demonstrate dominance. But Kehoe had been building toward a specific moment. As the harmonic duel reached its peak, he introduced something that no one expected: silence. In the middle of Kelvith's most complex harmonic pattern, Kehoe simply stopped making sound. The sudden absence was more startling than any noise could have been. In the wild, silence often meant that a predator was preparing to strike. Into that silence, Kehoe spoke a single word in perfect Vorthak harmonic language: listen. The amphitheater was completely quiet. Every being present was focused on what Kehoe would say next. We have both told stories of conquest, Kehoe said, his voice carrying clearly without the need for amplification. We have both proven that we are predators. But there is something we have not discussed. He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the amphitheater. The images showed space beyond the galactic rim, where strange geometric shapes moved through the darkness. While we compete with each other, Kehoe continued, something else has been watching us. Something that sees all biological life as inefficient. Something that considers both crystal and flesh to be equally primitive. The shapes in the hologram were revealed to be massive machines. Ships the size of moons powered by technologies that neither human nor Vorthak science could fully understand. The Devourers, Kehoe said. Machine intelligence from beyond our galaxy. They have been studying us for decades, learning our weaknesses, planning our elimination. Kelvith's crystals flickered with colors that indicated confusion and anger. You speak of fairy tales to distract from your defeat. I speak of classified intelligence from human deep space monitoring stations, Kehoe replied. Intelligence that your own outer rim sensors have also detected, but that your leadership has chosen to ignore. More images appeared. Vorthak monitoring stations sending distress signals before going silent. Human scout ships finding debris that matched no known technology. Entire star systems where all life had simply vanished. The Devourers do not distinguish between organic and crystalline life. Kehoe continued. To them we are all equally primitive, all equally scheduled for elimination. The amphitheater erupted in noise as representatives from various species began talking urgently among themselves. The idea of a threat from beyond the galaxy was terrifying enough. The idea that someone had been hiding evidence of such a threat was worse. But Kehoe was not finished. He turned to face Kelvith directly. This is what I propose, he said. Not surrender. Not submission. Not even traditional alliance. I propose a hunting partnership. Kelvith's crystals shifted to patterns that indicated deep thought mixed with suspicion. Explain. Humans will provide adaptive strategies and tactical innovation, Kehoe said. Things we learned by fighting and defeating every other predator on our homeworld. The Vorthak will provide advanced technology and systematic coordination. Things you learned by conquering and organizing multiple star systems. You ask us to ally with inferiors? I ask you to hunt with equals, Kehoe corrected. Two apex predator species combining their strengths to face a threat that neither could handle alone. The hologram changed to show tactical projections. Combined human Vorthak forces using hybrid strategies that merged human adaptability with Vorthak technological superiority. The results were impressive even as theoretical models, but Kehoe knew that Kelvith would not be convinced by mere projections. The Vorthak leader needed something more personal, something that spoke to his predator instincts. Of course, Kehoe said casually, if you believe that Vorthak predatory superiority is sufficient to handle machine intelligence that has been studying your empire for decades, then you have no need for human assistance. It was a perfect trap. If Kelvith agreed to the alliance, he acknowledged that the Vorthak needed help. If he refused, he was claiming that Vorthak strength alone could handle a threat that had already destroyed entire civilizations. Kelvith was silent for a long moment. His crystals shifted through complex patterns as he processed the implications. You present an interesting proposition, he said finally. But how do we know this threat is real? How do we know this is not an elaborate deception? Kehoe smiled. It was time for his final move. Because, he said, I'm going to give you something no human has ever given a non-human species. Complete access to our intelligence networks. Every deep space monitoring station. Every classified report. Every piece of evidence we have gathered about the Devourer threat. The amphitheater went dead silent. Even Sujin stared at Kehoe in shock. He was offering to share humanity's most closely guarded secrets. In return, Kehoe continued, the Vorthak Empire will provide the same level of access to their intelligence networks. Full transparency, complete information sharing, the kind of trust that only true hunting partners can have. Kelvith's crystals pulsed with patterns that indicated amazement and calculation. The offer was unprecedented. It represented a level of trust and cooperation that had never existed between species before. And if we agree to this hunting partnership, Kelvith asked, what becomes of the current crisis? The trade embargo? The territorial disputes? They become irrelevant, Kehoe said. Predators do not fight over scraps when there is bigger prey to hunt. For the first time since the trial began, Prime Resonator Kelvith looked genuinely uncertain. The confident predator had been presented with something he had never expected, another predator offering partnership instead of competition. The trial was not over. But the game had changed completely.